Well, multiply the value of your company by 30% and divide that by 2 hours. So your company's worth 5 million, 30% of that is a million five. You'd be making $750,000 an hour. If you'll just spend the 2 hours to tell us what to do to save your business and have it thrive after your death.
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Well, welcome to another episode of The Business Coach. I'm your host, David Finkel, and I have a special treat in store for you. The subject matter of this episode is heavy. It is thick, and it is dense, but it's incredibly important. What would happen to your company if you were untimely or unexpectedly ripped out of the business? An accident, car or bicycle or some other way that meant that you were out of it, or a health scare, cancer or something else, or a heart attack or an aneurysm. You'd think these things don't happen, but when you've been a business coach as long as I have, over 25 years of doing this, there's been enough clients who have had terminal cancer and passed, or heart attacks, or car accidents, or other things that go on. This week I'm joined by Alan Gassman. Those of you that know Alan, he's the Maui advisor on asset protection and estate planning. Alan has been a business attorney and an estate planning attorney now for over 40 years. He's been my personal, my family's, and our company's and various entities' attorney now for over a decade. He's a fantastic business mind and also an extraordinary legal expert. He's actually part of it. If you imagine this, there's actually a Hall of Fame for estate planning. He's one of a few handful of the thousands of attorneys that are in that field that is in that Hall of Fame. He really knows his stuff, and we're going to be talking through what are some simple steps that a business owner has to take today to protect themselves from that untimely moment that statistically isn't going to happen to every business owner this year or over the next 10 years, but the odds are that it's going to happen to a lot of business owners over the next 1 to 10 years. And what can you do to protect yourself? And we're going to end the episode with a simple formula for you to think about how the hourly rate on the 2 or 10 hours of preventative work that you could take some simple steps today might be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars per hour down the road. It's that straightforward of a calculation. And we'll go through how can you do, if you only had 2 hours to do one step, we'll go through what Alan and I recommend to you in this episode as the one step for you to take to protect yourself should you be untimely and abruptly pulled from the business, ripped from the business. Without further ado, please join me and Alan Gassman for the balance of the podcast. Thanks this week for joining us for The Business Coach, and let's get into my conversation with Alan Gassman. Well, Alan, welcome to The Business Coach. How are you doing today?
Good, David. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I was really excited that this day came by. I always like having conversations, especially we'll get into the topic for today. But those that don't know Alan, his law firm is out in Florida, and every time I come to visit in person, which I've done probably periodically every 2 or 3 years, you always have a funny sign up front that somehow it shouldn't be allowed that a law firm would actually have this good of a sense of humor. What's on the sign for today outside of the Gassman firm?
I think
If I
one
were
side
outside
is
your building.
I think one side is industrious sign seeks better building. And then
Industrious science seeks better building. I love that. That's really cute. What's the other side say?
the other one is the all-time favorite, and that's complicating lives since 1984.
Your firm has been complicating life since 1984. I have a question for you. I'll tease you. Disclosure here, Alan and his firm have been my asset protection and estate planning attorneys for a long time. They work with probably, I'm going to say, I don't know what it is, 30, 50, 100 of the Maui clients from the community of our coaching clients. But Alan, I have a question for you. A little tongue in cheek here. Did you ever think that because your signs are as funny as they are, people who drive and commute to work will look at them and then they'll get into an accident and then they'll come back to you and say you were too funny and you were the proximate cause of the accident. Does that ever worry you?
Well, that's why I have a sign slogan writer on my liability insurance policy.
If only there was such, well, there probably is such a thing, but it's unusual, I would imagine. That's great. So today, Alan, we're going to talk a little bit about succession planning. So we both come at planning for contingencies and succession planning from two different sides for our clients, right? As a business coach, we come at it from how do we reduce reliance on the owner? How do we increase strategic depth? How do we have good systems in place? But we tend to get a client who has a little bit of time and a deliberate process to do that. Whereas I know in your world, you've had situations where you get the emergencies just happen. There's a health moment, car accident, no tongue in cheek with this, or some other part where the owner has either temporarily or permanently no longer can participate in that business. And that abruptness of ripping the owner out of the business can often cause real harm. And I guess I want to start off with, can you give us a kind of a story that we can work with about where that's happened for a client wherein he or she wasn't prepared and something happened that abruptly pulled them out. I use the word ripped them out of the business. And by not being prepared for that, how it hurt the business, their employees, their customers, and everybody's family.
Well, we have these happen just about every year, sometimes multiple times in the year, because nobody really thinks they're going to die. And boy, especially when they get the news that they're going to die soon, they don't get more logical. They get more illogical. So what you have is a couple of different kinds of messes that occur, maybe three types of messes. Number one, what do you do with the business? Who can you even trust and not trust? When the big fish in the aquarium disappears, the little fish start fighting. So you see that. Then you see, hey, Harry controlled everything, but none of us really understood how it worked. What is this contract he was negotiating? What is this handshake supposed to mean? There's a lot of mysteries. And of course, Harry was a procrastinator. So you have a lot of things that needed to be done, maybe during the time of illness. And then the third thing you have is extreme psychological challenge to the survivors. They're upset. They just lost their patriarch or their matriarch, and they're just upset. It's hard enough to tie their shoes and eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner when you lose someone like that. So just imagine that tsunami, all three of those things happening at the same time. That's now some people come to the rescue. Some people really rise to the occasion, and some spouses can go in there and run a business they don't know about. But more often, this becomes a car with one or two flat tires going too fast, and no one's sure how to put on the brakes or when to turn left or right.
I mean, as I
That's
hear
what
you
it
say
feels.
that, Alan, what comes to mind is I'm thinking of a client of ours who ran a handyman business. It was a very successful company. The husband ran it. His wife did some of the bookkeeping and accounting work, but really had no direct day-to-day involvement in the operation. And he had a heart attack, died out of the blue. And she made the decision to keep the business. And as she stepped in to run it, there was so much, like you called it, the mysteries. I thought that was a great way of explaining it. Things that this owner, in your case, you called him Harry. Harry never explained to other people. It wasn't that he intended to keep it so close to his chest. It never occurred to him that other people should know. Maybe he was a little uncomfortable sharing it. Maybe he was too busy. And for that spouse coming in now, we were able to work with her to make the business work to some degree, but it was always harder than it needed to be because of the lack of preparation.
Well, they were so lucky they had like a coach from your organization and somebody who cared and who knew something about the business and knew how to find ethical people to help her. That was a big benefit.
You talked in here about in an emergency situation, no one, if you're not prepared, that's not the time that you're going to be able to figure this out. Whether it be the person is just hurt and not dead, or if the person's dead, their heirs or spouse, that's not the time where they're going to be thinking straight. Can you just touch on this part here? Because I've been guilty of this. I'm 55. I've had some health scares along the way. But once the health scare goes away, I don't want to think about my own living decomposition or facing of mortality. And what do you say to a client that helps them to see that, look, this is going to happen in some fashion, whether it's now or in the far future, and we need to be prepared for it? Because I think a lot of business owners think, yes, I see it's important, but I'll do it later. I'll do it later. I'll do it later. And sometimes they have that luxury, but sometimes they don't. How do you shake them out of that lethargy before they have a rude, painful awakening, or their heirs or spouse does?
Well, sometimes I say, let's just pretend that you died yesterday. What should we know and what should we do today? And what does your spouse know and not know? And then I just be quiet and listen to them. And that forces them to think through. They may not think it's realistic that they would die. Asking that question and politely forcing them to answer it, that starts a dialogue, starts them thinking.
As I hear you say that, what jumped to my mind, it's brilliant. I know it's to you, it probably seems common sense, and it is. But I thought to myself, I'm now going to tell my clients this idea of, look, pull out your phone and do an audio recording or a video of you saying this, right? You don't have to, if I make the client write it all out in a fancy thing, they're not going to do it. But write it out, record it. Later on, we can throw it through a chat GPT and have it organize it into a prettier version of it. But I love this question. Hey, Alan, pretend you died yesterday. What should we know about your law firm, about your practice, that would be important for us stepping in the first day, in the first week, in the first month, in the first 90 days? What should we know? Who should we trust, and who should we trust only to certain limits based on capability, or based maybe on personality that means that they're a little bit less trustworthy? I love that. When they say this, Alan, what kinds of information do they commonly share?
They will commonly share the name of a friend or colleague or key employee who they think has the best chance of running the business. They'll commonly think of two or three people to stay away from and to not trust. They commonly almost instantly have an opinion as to whether the company needs to be sold or whether the children and friends and key employees could keep it going for a period of time. And then you'd also think about cash flow and is there enough life insurance involved? Because a couple, $3 million of life insurance proceeds coming in can help give everyone a buffer.
Yeah. You've said several things I want to unpack here. So the first is, who's going to run this business and their inability to, or their absence from? I love that. And is it a friend, a colleague, a mastermind partner, or is it a key member of their team? Now, hopefully, if we've started this work of building strategic depth and we've had 3 or 4 years of doing this work bit by bit over time to develop systems, internal team, et cetera, hopefully we have a person who can step forward to run it, whether we choose to keep it or we know it's going to have to be sold differently. And I think the second thing you said there, though, Alan, really stood out to me. I wrote it in my notes here. Your comment was, who are the two or three people, tempting though they might be, not to trust in this process, whether they're employees that should not be able to run it, they're a great number two, but they're not a number one, or it might be the close, dear friend that always talks about how he or she's a great business person, but while I never wanted to confront them on this, I also know that they're full of malarkey. We'll call it that today, malarkey. And I want to tell my spouse they're not capable or competent of running this. If they offer to help, smile, thank them, but let them know that when you need something, you'll ask. Have you seen that a business, a spouse or someone else has gotten into trouble because they didn't have any indication and they turned over to an advisor or to someone else to run the business who had no business running the business?
It's commonly a brother-in-law.
Those brother-in-laws, man,
The
they
widow,
just don't know what they're doing.
the widow's brother. He's a microbiologist, so he knows all about how to run a carpentry company.
And we can laugh, but I'm laughing with a degree of pain in it because I've seen that with clients as well with that part. If you would have asked me 2 years into coaching, does business owners ever die? I would have said, no, we're immortal. Our company's immortal. But at this point, 20 years later, we've had clients who unfortunately have passed with cancer, heart attacks, car accidents, cycling accidents, or debilitation where they can no longer run. And this is the real world, isn't it, Alan?
Yeah. Something else that comes to mind is it used to be that most successful businesses had a very good CPA who was also a good business person and cared about them. And that's much fewer and farther between. So tomorrow I'm meeting with a widow and the family longtime CPA to talk about the business. And some things aren't working well, some things are working well, but the CPA understands it and can get in there in the trenches and help. So a lot of clients just don't have that great CPA anymore. I'm sure glad I have a good one.
Yeah.
And I
And that
think
makes
that's another
perfect
thing that
sense.
makes it more hazardous when you lose somebody if you don't even have anyone on the accounting side who cares about the business.
Hey everybody, David here, just stepping out of the podcast for a moment. I want to let you know of an exciting new resource that my staff and I have been working on for over a year and a half. And I want to give you complimentary access to do that tool now. It's called the Ultimate Business Owner Growth Toolkit. And in there has our 6 most popular, most powerful, fast acting tools to grow your company. It'll help you do things like get control of your time, how to actually have a roadmap for scaling your company, how to do strategic planning. Each of these short PDF tools comes with a video-based instruction, 5, 7, 8 minutes of me teaching you how to use the tool so you can right away put it into practice to grow sales, increase margins, improve bottom line profitability of your company, and most importantly, to start building a business, not just owning a job for yourself. With that said, please get access to the toolkit now. You can see that in the show notes, or you can also go to MauiMastermind.com. That's MauiMastermind.com. Click on the resources nav bar, and there you'll have access to that toolkit to start using that right away to produce results in your business. With that said, let's get back into this week's podcast episode. And you're bringing up a great distinction, which is in addition to knowing who's going to step in and be the leader of the business, making decisions until whatever next transition happens, it is really helpful for that surviving spouse or the spouse who has the health to be able to do this while the other one is dealing with what they're dealing with, to be able to come in and be able to give counsel or advice, whether that's attorney, whether that's CPA or both, or other types of people. And Alan, one of the things we'll commonly work with larger clients on creating a board of advisors, whether that's a formal board of directors, which usually for clients of ours, it's not. They're privately held companies. They don't want to give up authority to an advisory board, but they do want the value of outside perspectives, access to contacts, et cetera. So they'll do that typically in a more informal basis. And that I found has been a helpful one for companies to have that group that they're probably not going to step in and run it, but they certainly can step in to help find the successor if the decision is to keep the business running over the longer term.
And they know each other and they've worked together on some stuff. That's important.
Yeah. When you think about a business, one of the things that say, hey, imagine you died yesterday. What are some of the concerns that would need to be taken care of in the next 5 to 30 days? I think the owner is going to say things, well, like, gosh, currently I'm the one who does all the payroll final authorizations, whether it's through an ACH payment system or some of our clients still physically sign checks. So how do we do that? How to make sure that we have enough, like you talked about, enough liquidity. Yes, you can talk about the life insurance, but it's still going to probably, how long does it take for a policy to even pay out, Alan? I don't think it's going to come a day
Yeah.
later, is it?
60, 90 days is not uncommon. You wait a long time for that money.
Yeah. So if I'm a business, how am I going to be in the short term? I might have 90 days of liquidity challenge that I need to be prepared for. How are we going to handle it? Now, these are all things that if I'm coaching a client, we should have dealt with before now anyways. Why? Because it doesn't make sense that any one person is the only one who can do a function, whether that person's the owner or someone else. Everyone in every function, if it's mission critical, needs a backup for it. And so we've had owners where we've had, if they don't have someone on their staff who they trust because they're a smaller company, well, great. Once a quarter, let's have your spouse come in and actually, with your supervision, be the one to do the final payroll authorization, so at least he or she can learn how to do it. Or, hey, how can we groom or grow Silvio in the business to be the second approver, so that when Henrietta does the payroll setup, a second party unrelated can do the final authorization, and you're covered that way. When you see that, what tends to be the reaction or the response? I'm curious for your clients when you bring up to them in this conversation, hey, if you weren't here, what happens? What needs to happen? How do you bring up about financial controls that are there? Because that's probably one of the things that scares them most, access to
Right.
money.
Right. Yeah. All I can do is ask and say, is there enough money? Would you need money right away? Who would handle the finances of the business? But another one, David, and then I'm sure you understand, is a lot of businesses, the attractant of business, the referrals, the confidence of the business is the guy who just died or the lady who just died. And all of a sudden, everybody's saying, well, is the business gone? Do I need to start dealing with another business? And how do you get your customer loyalty back? And you've got to do that quickly. You've got to have hopefully people in your organization who can immediately reach out and say, hey, Ralph died. It's really sad. We're ready to take your order and get your widgets back out to you. And having those people have non-competes is important because they just may all flee and go work for the competitor a week later, and then the business goes to nothing.
I want to come back and talk about that non-compete in a moment, Alan. I think that's an important one as well. And perhaps we'll talk in there about, if we can't make it under the non-compete, at least we could have some protections from solicitation or from taking our database of clients if we can't enforce the non-competes. But we'll just stay for a moment here, which is that when a business loses its leader, the owner or the founder, there's really two extreme cases for that. Case number one is the worst case, wherein there's been no real groundwork that's been done for that. And like you said, everyone is now freaked out. They're freaked out because someone they cared about, whether they cared positively or negatively, we're not saying, but this person was an important person in their life, is now gone abruptly. That shakes people up, no question about it. But it's not just the people in the business, the employees that are that way. It's also their families that are saying things to them, their spouses. And your customers are also thinking, well, gosh, this is really a troubling thing, but I've got all my people I've got to provide for. Gosh, can they still produce what they need to do? So there's that case. The same thing happens, but it's lesser so when it's a company that really has prepared well along the way. So if it's a client of ours and we've been coaching them for 6 or 7 years, heaven forbid something like that happens, we've always made sure that they have more depth with there. And that includes key relationships. We think of it, Alan, like a rock climber. We don't want just one handhold on the rock. We want multiple points, 3 points of contact. We want the owner has great relationships with your dozen biggest customers or clients, but we want to make sure that they also know several other people in the company that really do service those accounts, so that we are embedded with them in multiple ways to protect from that. For the rude awakening, how have you seen that they've created enough certainty so that people don't jump ship, whether they're customers or staff members? How have you seen that they've, because that's the hard part. It's the panic for the first 30 to 60 days when, if there's not someone stepping in to be a voice of confidence, a voice of certainty, that's when people panic and think, I've got to look after my family. And they do behaviors that really hurt the business that they're leaving.
Well, it's all about the same business success issues. Who's your team and what are your systems? It's not hard to tell when I go to my doctor's office or my dentist's office or my architect's office if they have their act together and there's a nice team there and there's systems versus, oh, I love my doctor. His name is Clyde. He's very disorganized. It's really cute. It's really cute until he dies and then they can't find my chart anywhere.
Yeah.
So I think trying to make it a level 2 business makes all the difference in the world. And having had the spouse involved, which you do a great job of that at Maui Mastermind, the spouse is involved enough to know how to drive that vehicle and keep it on the highway while help is on its way. And I think everyone's customers pretty much know whether they're dealing with a class act organization or something, or they're just tolerating an organization that's disorganized, and they can smell that and they'll flee. And
As you
that's what
say that, what comes to mind for me, Alan, and then we're going to go to the non-compete and some of the contractual parts, because I want to pick your brain of your expertise, really is the owner who never, like, we come to work with a lot of clients who have built successful companies initially, but they've done it on the back of their personal production. They work extremely hard, long hours, rarely take extended vacations of any kind. And they're surprised to find that one of the things we push them to do is to plan for the day 6, 12, 18, 24 months later, they take their next extended vacation. And this idea of being away from the business is actually healthy for the business to grow independent of the owner's presence with that, both internally with the team and the systems and who does what. And those mysteries, if I'm going to be gone, like I'll give an extreme example. Every year, Alan, I'm taking 3 months off in the summertime. If I'm the person who has all these mysteries and I'm gone for 3 months, we're going to discover where things go. That's why at the end of the summer, I always debrief with my team and say, hey, what worked really well and where was it hard and what can we do to prepare for the next time that there's an extended time. So if we're doing the work along the way, it shouldn't be such a big shock. But if an owner is not taking any vacations, that's a warning light in my book as a coach to say their business probably is not prepared for them not being there. And usually it's a control thing for the owner. He or she just can't imagine that anyone could ever do it as well as they could. And whether they're right or wrong, their ferocity of holding on to control costs them so much that they don't realize.
absolutely.
On the non-compete side, Alan, so let's play this one out. Let's game this out. So Harry passes away, and usually it's the salesperson who's the one, or the salespeople that are more likely to leave taking business with them. That's most common. Or a number two person who has the same expertise, who maybe is a little bit chafed under Harry's founder's guiding hand sometimes. How do we protect from that with a non-compete?
Well, in most states, the non-compete can say that when you leave this business for a certain period of time, you can't compete against it. You can't contact customers. You can't contact suppliers. Go far away or stay loyal to the business. That's not going to be enforceable in some states like California unless the person has an actual ownership interest in the business. And sometimes we advise clients to sell their key employees 2%, 3%, 4% each, so you can have an enforceable
That's
non-compete.
really interesting. So if I were an owner and I have Sylvia, who is phenomenal, but she's the key number two in the business, and if I were to sell her a 2% stake in the company with smart buyback provisions in there, so if we ever parted ways based on a thing, she would get a fair payment back for her 2%, et cetera, et cetera. Would that now let the non-compete be enforceable if something happened to me?
Yes, it would.
Ooh, that's an interesting one with that part. And now she's also more vested in the firm's stake with that part. Talk about this though, Alan. I'm curious. From a practical standpoint, it's one thing that a non-compete is or is not enforceable. There's another from the psychological factor. What's your experience been about the psychological factor of helping a non-compete, helping people to behave more in line with what we're hoping that they'll behave?
Well, I have to explain to the employee that if the non-compete is enforceable or not enforceable, you're going to have an agonizing year of litigation before a judge will decide if it's enforceable. And if you've been competing and the judge decides a year from now that it's enforceable, you're going to owe all kinds of damages. And what bank is going to loan you money when you're being sued like that? And who's going to do business with you when you're being sued like that? So from the point of view of the employee, they're most likely going to be very respectful of the non-compete if there's any chance that it's going to be enforceable.
And I
But
noticed that there was a conversation along the way, and your demeanor, I can imagine you doing this, having known you for the decade plus that I've known you, that it probably is a very affable conversation with, but the fact that you're a well-spoken attorney having this affable conversation with them gives the message without having to create a bristling effect or some kind of negative effect. Has that been your experience, Alan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What are some of the other protections if we don't go the non-compete route, but if we want to have some IP protections, what are some of the things that we can use IP wise, whether it be customer lists or proprietary know-how, that will help us to have some of those protections in place that are enforceable with employees?
Well, labeling things that they're copyrighted and having the employee sign a confidentiality agreement, recognizing that anything developed during the employment term is owned directly and only by the employer and not by the employee. Typically, in most states, you have what's called shop rights. If I helped my employer invent it, then I can use it too. But people can sign away their shop rights. It's a good idea to ask them to make sure that all intellectual property only belongs to the employer and agree that they will wipe their computers clean and wipe their phones clean, wipe all their devices clean, and let the employer confirm that by physical and electronic inspection. That can help.
That makes good sense. And this is all going to be contained in an employment contract of some sort. Question for you, Alan. A lot of people are going to say, well, I don't have employment contracts, so how do I all of a sudden have one? Or I have one, but it doesn't have all these things. How am I going to bring this back up with them and not freak them out? I've got a few thoughts on this, but I'm curious what your thoughts are that you would give to advice to that business owner about that problem or that.
Well, it's a real problem, and maybe it's more for your coach to help you solve. But you might just write him a nice fat bonus check and say, "Hey, Clyde, it's bonus time, and I'm really thankful for what you've done, and I'm gonna give you a bonus of 20% of your annual pay because we just had a fantastic year. But quite candidly, my mean coach David has been telling me for years that I really need to get you to sign a non-compete, and he sent me to even a meaner lawyer. And here's what but I told the lawyer to be very gentle, and here's all you have to do. All you have to do is sign this to get your $35,000 bonus. And that may be the best $35,000 anyone ever paid.
Yeah.
Or I like you so much that not only am I giving you this bonus but I'm giving you 3% of the stock of the company. So, and that may buy a little loyalty when the operating agreement they sign on to has the non-compete.
I love it. It's interesting, Alan. We both came to the same conclusion independently. I will often coach clients, hey, that this conversation happens in two different kind of contexts. The first is usually it's going to be around a compensation increase, right? A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, as my friend Mary Poppins once said, right? We're going to do that with some sugar. Number two, I'll tell clients what I hope this is not a one-off occurrence. If there's someone I've been working with our company, we're going to along the way have been working on strategic depth, which means we've had conversations as the owner with our staff about, how do we make sure that we have depth in what we do? And the owner has taken the onus to start off with saying, look, I recognize that right now I'm the one that has the main point of contact with our 10 biggest clients. And I also recognize right now that currently I'm the only one who can sign the payroll checks. And I currently recognize that I'm the only one who can do these things. I'm making a commitment to you all that as we mature the business and grow it in terms of revenue and profitability and serve more people, we're also going to mature the business to make sure that each year we're better, and better situated so we have more and more foundation to protect everybody. To that end, this quarter, I've already talked with Julie offline. She's going to be my backup to sign payroll checks, heaven forbid something happens to me, for a period of time. And then somewhere a month or a quarter or half a year later, I'm going to tell them my next step I'm taking. And oh, by the way, what is it that are the vulnerabilities or the danger points for you? And what can you do this quarter that would reduce one of those in some significant way? And so we make this process of strategic depth a conversation, Alan. And because of it, it becomes easier now that when I'm doing that new agreement, hey, one of the ways we're maturing and straightening up our act is we're actually professionalizing our company, that there are, in fact, going to be written employment agreements that we'll be doing across the board. We're starting with our leadership team. So here's me talking with you, and it makes sense that as long as we're doing this, that we should do a review of your compensation. And quite frankly, I think you've earned an 8% increase, right? And we're going to do that at the same time for this. So does that spark anything more for you, Alan, on that subject?
No, I think you covered it beautifully. I think
Okay. Last part I want to get into here about, heaven forbid something goes on here. Tell me a little bit about, for the non-participating spouse or from someone from the outside who might be the person the owner wants to take charge, what documents does that person need to have to be able to do things like talk, to make decisions in the business, to deal with the bankers, to deal with access of money? What needs to be in place from a legal standpoint to have that framework in place? I know it's not enough to say, well, Harry said I'm the person to come in, so here's me coming in. I'm going to need more than just Harry's third-party word. What are we going to need there from a practical agreement standpoint to make sure that this is taken care of, so that Harry's number two who steps forward really, in fact, has the authority to do the right things, but also smart protections in place?
well, there's almost always a company or companies involved, and usually the person we lose is the president. If there is a vice president and a secretary or a treasurer, then those people can carry on the day-to-day business of the company. Having somebody trustworthy as a signer on the account besides the key person is helpful. I just went through a situation where it took a family like 3.5 weeks to get a particular brokerage firm to let them into their accounts, and that was agony. There's a thing called a revocable trust where I could be the trustee of my own revocable trust, have my company held by the trust, make my spouse the alternate trustee of my trust, and then on my death, the spouse amends the bylaws basically and makes the spouse and whoever she chooses the officers, and there's instant control. If you own the company in your own personal name and you die, we have to get somebody appointed to be your executor under state law. I'm working on one of those right now where we're 5 weeks from death because it took a long time to get the death certificate. Then it takes a long time to find the original will, which is in somebody's vault somewhere. And it can take months before you can get control. So thinking it ahead with your estate planning lawyer, making sure the documents are correct for that is a prudent thing to do.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. So what does the operating agreement say? Who's the person who's the successor in the decision-making process, the successor manager or something? Is something like that going to be important? Like how quickly, if your spouse has a power of attorney, or forget, spouse is probably easier case. Let's make the harder case. It's the trustee of the trust who's the successor trustee, non-related party. How realistically fast are they going to have access, and how do we speed up that access for them to have access to the financial side, to the decision authority to contract on behalf of the company from a practical standpoint? I know the document says that, but how long does it actually take to actually get that to work in the real world for third parties to take it and rely on it?
Anywhere from an hour to 3 months, depending upon what it is. The power of attorney that I give my best friend expires on my death.
Hmm.
My last will and testament doesn't do anything until the judge recognizes the and appoints the personal representative, which can take weeks, if not months. My living trust, however, if it owns the stock and it's properly written, that could take an hour. So it all depends on everybody's got a different situation. I can't stereotype. The main thing is have a competent lawyer look at it and tell you what your choices are so that you can make sure that the right people do have control.
Yeah. So the very last thing I want to have us talk about here, Alan, I know we've both been involved in helping clients sell companies. And so if the decision's made that the company really isn't viable, should the owner no longer be there to materially participate, my first comment, and you said this yourself, which is don't have your spouse or your state figure that out. You have all this insider information. Get the ego out of it, get the emotion out of it while I'm in a healthy, grounded place. I should tell my spouse, hey, Heather, if I'm going to be gone, like brain wise, for 3 months or 6 months or a year, no problem. The company can keep going. Here's what you do. But if I'm gone forever, really it's probably not the right move for you to hang on to the company. This is the steps that I want you to take. Or, yes, you can keep the company forever. Here's what you do. Joe steps into the CEO or the president role. Here's how you change his compensation to align it. Here's who you put as your counselors, these three people, to give you advice on how well he and the company are performing. The owner should decide that in advance and share that with whoever is going to be making that call, because no one will know what the owner does in that abrupt situation.
I agree. Another thing that don't assume that everyone's going to get along
Mm,
because they don't always get along. Don't assume that your children and their spouses are all going to be very happy as to how, and they're all going to agree on what approach to take with your business, or that they are going to accept the fact that their troublemaker children shouldn't be working in the business or should set an example instead of being an eyesore. So, or that second spouse with different children is going to get along great with your children, because that doesn't always happen in the real world. So putting one person in charge, even though others may resent that, having one captain of the ship can be much more effective than having three captains of the ship, because then the ship doesn't even know which way to go. To try to think that through as well.
that's great. I would even say, giving advice, go back and do your video or your audio recording and saying, hey, Michael, if you ever need to sell the company and I'm no longer here, here's how I would imagine it's going to be valued. And here's two people that you can talk with that I know in our industry, our investment bankers or sell side advisors in our industry, both of whom are credible. Talk to both of them. Here's likely how they'll get compensated. Here's likely the steps that they would take. Here's who you can trust to see if what they're saying to you really is reasonable. Talk to Alan, talk to Kevin, talk to Cheryl. Each of these people can give you impartial information. They've had experience sets with this before. And ultimately, this is what I would hope that you would be able to do. And quite frankly, if it's anything above this number, you're better off taking it. If it's below this number, you're better off keeping the company. Let's let Harold run it for the next 36, 48 months, and you'll make more just from keeping the company, even if it is slowly degrading with that part. Now, I've said that to various clients of mine. I'm curious, Alan, have you ever seen clients of yours that have actually taken those steps? How rare or how common is that?
Pretty rare.
Yeah.
Pretty rare.
When they do, how much better is the life for their family afterwards?
Much better. Much better. Because the person who does that also usually has a better team. They've planned ahead. They've got a nice team. They've got a nice organization. They have nice systems in place. They've already had the conversation with the spouse. So it certainly goes much better.
Here's my last question to you, Alan, then we'll call it to an end here, which is, what would you say to the person who's heard everything in this conversation? They've listened to this episode and they say, they're nodding along. They're like, Alan, I'm with you. David, I'm with you. And the last thing they're going to say at the very end is, I'll get to this some point down the road. I'm too busy right now. I'll do it later. What's your last opportunity to shake this person so that it's in their own best interest to not wait too long?
Well, multiply the value of your company by 30% and divide that by 2 hours. So your company's worth 5 million, 30% of that is a million five. You'd be making $750,000 an hour. If you'll just spend the 2 hours to tell us what to do to save your business and have it thrive after your death. So I just think there's a big, big, big return on investment there. Think about a time when you can do this. It could just be during your morning walking of the dog
I
or
love it.
after a cocktail when you've traveled. Just get it on paper one way or the other, because it's important to the people who love you and who you love.
Alan, thank you for spending this time with us here on The Business Coach. It's always a treasure and a treat to get the time together. You give such good counsel. That last part there about saying, are you really too busy to make $750,000 per hour on an hourly rate? Because the difference between how the outcome will be with and without even a minimal level of planning, just these 2 hours, is so marked. That's really sage advice. Thank you for joining us today, Alan. We really value your thoughts, your insights, and your expertise. Plus, thank you for making us smile and laugh at the beginning of the episode.
All right, David, thank you very much. Keep up the great work.
Bye, everybody. You've listened to another episode of the Business Coach Podcast. We'll see you next week.